There we go. Well, welcome everybody to today's session sponsored by the Learning Revolution. I am so grateful for Steve for putting on these sessions. I think they're so helpful and informative to people. I'm just going to move my little taskbar down here. We're all getting used to this. So this session I thought would be pretty relevant today because suddenly the whole world is homeschooling. Although technically they're not really homeschooling, what they're doing is home-based school. So education is no longer where it takes place. There used to be a definite definition for homeschooling and a definite definition for school. But now those boundaries have blurred. So it is more a matter of now who controls, who makes the decisions about the education, okay? So thank you for joining me today. My name is Judy Arnall, and I am a Canadian family life educator and child development specialist. That's my work. I teach family communication and child and brain development. I'm also an author, excuse me. I have written 5 print books on non-punitive parenting. They're bestsellers. So Discipline Without Distress is about non-punishment, the philosophy and the practice. Parenting with Patience is really needed during these times, is handling stress and anger and helping our children handle stress and anger. Attachment Parenting Tips has no theory, just tips of my tips raising 5 kids without ever punishing them. And they've been translated into different languages. I was a founder of Unschooling Canada.ca, and we have a lot of resources on our website. We're trying to get support and information out there for unschooling and self-directed education. And my last book is Unschooling to University, which is kind of what this, we'll go through a lot of what's in the book. What is unschooling? Why? How? And how does that fit with brain development stages? Okay. We love teachers. I don't like the term unschooling. It's very not supportive of school, but it's the term that people know about when they think about self-directed education. So I'm going to talk for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to questions. Okay, so if you could mute yourself until then, that would be awesome. And we love teachers too. We just think sometimes the system is not very effective for people. So what is the problem? What do kids bring to school and when do they lose it? Because you see those little kids on their first day, they're full of curiosity, passion, creativity, and sometimes between age 5 and 15, they lose it. They lose their motivation, their excitement for learning, and children are never not learning. The minute we are born, the minute we breathe, we're learning. Learning is not something children need to be taught. It is something that happens all the time. So the worldwide rate of high school dropout is anywhere from 20 to 80%, depending on countries. That's not good. So what's a possible solution? Maybe the key to engaged thinkers is not so much more school, earlier and younger school. Maybe it is allowing them to decide what they need to learn. Doesn't always mean that they teach themselves, although that is certainly a component of self-directed education. But what it means is directive, the control of what the learner learns. And everybody owns it from the day they're born. I love this quote. Our greatest obligation is to prepare our children for effectiveness in the world they'll inherit, not the world we have known. And it's by Grace and Kirk, which kind of says that what's working for the last 150 years may not be what is going to work from now. And the big difference is content is at our fingertips. Parents are asking me, oh, what are some homeschooling educational sites for my children? And I can't even name them all. There are hundreds and thousands of websites now that are offering things to learn. You can't even put together a list. It is so incredible. There's so much content at our children's fingertips. What they need now is relationships. They need relationships to weave through all that information. This is what our education system is designed to grow. All these 10 competencies are competencies that can be shared within relationships. The one of apply literacies, that's the content. That's math, English, science, geography, and that is so available online. So in unschooling, children can acquire most of their knowledge that they need to know through play. So this diagram kind of shows you how children are born and then they play and they learn and they're sponges, they learn everything. And then at age 6, we say, I'm sorry, you can't continue to learn what you want to learn. You have to learn what the government wants you to learn. And for unschoolers, they continue on their learning and they learn most of what the kids learn in school anyways. And they do it through motivated play, through just living life and understanding what they want to learn and going after it. And many of them head into school maybe for the grade 12 year to get the credentials, to validate everything they've learned through play. So when we ask people in conferences, what are ways you've learned what you know today? We get a lot of responses. School, right down here at this list, is only one way to learn things. We have a whole world of experiences and technology to learn things. And students are now borderless. We can learn from any course or resource anywhere in the world, as you're learning through this session today. Now, the future may be improving qualifications, but boundaries and regulation are way less important now. So basically, there's 3 ways to get an education. There's school, which is government controlled. There's homeschooling, which is parent controlled. And then there's unschooling, which is learner controlled. So defined, unschooling is freedom. Freedom to learn anything anybody wants to know. It's a philosophy and lifestyle of educational freedom in which a child's natural curiosity and motivation, nurtured in a rich and stimulating environment, gotta have that, will lead the child to learn what he or she needs to know when they need to know it. So it's like a buffet and the child is standing there with a plate in front of them. And not the government and not the parent, but the child decides what goes on that plate. Will it be more broccoli? Maybe more of the chocolate cake, the video games. Or if you let a child choose, just as we teach parents in feeding children, if you let them choose, they will choose according to what their body needs or what their mind needs. And they will pick a whole variety of things to learn. It's just amazing if you let kids control their education. So terminology, it's usually called self-directed education in a school. And at home, it's called unschooling. So we tend to use those 2 terms interchangeably. But the main point is the learners choose not only the pace of learning, but the content, the resources, the methodology, and some learners choose to have a classroom experience, or they choose to not. And scope and sequence, all within the learner's control. There are a lot of benefits of unschooling. In my book, I list 23 academics, 11 emotional, 16 social, 6 physical, and 5 societal. Can't cover all those right now, but let's just look at motivation. Motivation is one of the #1 problems in schools, And yet in unschooling, it's never a problem. If it is a problem, then it's not unschooling. The child is already always developmentally ready for new content, always. There's no learning anxiety present. The child understands rather than memorizes. And when children choose what they learn, it sticks. It's something that has real meaning for them. So absorption of material is very high. There's no power struggles between child or teacher, which a lot of parents are experiencing now in home education when they have to teach somebody else's agenda. So these are some of the advantages. It develops a love of learning for just its intrinsic value. Don't have to give them pizza coupons to learn. And it enhances creativity, decision-making, and a whole range of other things. Okay, there's a few advantages. Disadvantages. Interests erupt at inconvenient times. That happens. When your child wants to learn all about snakes at 11 p.m. at night, just around, to get out of bed, that can be inconvenient. Costs may be a barrier, although it is far, far cost effective to do unschooling rather than to buy curriculum, teach curriculum and teachers' methods and assessment. And learning is somewhat difficult to measure. And that's a big section of education is assessment and evaluation. And when children do not produce, or you don't force children to produce output, then we treasure what we measure, and there's nothing to measure. So it requires a lot of trust that children are learning what they need to know. So I'll tell you a little bit about our story. We have 5 kids, and in the system we found their learning needs were not met. So the 2 older kids went to school and we pulled them out to homeschool. So then the trouble started. By November of that year, they weren't listening to good old mom because it changes. The teacher-student dynamic changes in home education. So the teacher, me, I have to change my role to facilitator. And more, I say we were homeschoolers that never got around to homeschooling. We let it slide. And for the next 12 years, we played. It was so much fun. Now, I know I teach adults as my work, my professional work, and we allow adults to empower their education by being self-directed, but we don't often allow children the same privilege. And we should, because adult learning principles can really adapt to child learning principles. The only one thing that can adapt is children don't know what they need to know, but they're really good at finding and solving their problems. So my children wrote the 21 diploma exams so far, which is grade 12 exams. They scored very well. They got scholarships and they went on to university. And around that time, a lot of their friends went on to university, colleges, post-secondary schools. And I thought, gee, this information has to get out there. People have to know this is a valid way to educate children. And so I wrote a book. I did surveys, asked them, did you go to preschool? What area did you go into? We had 10 art students, 10 humanities students, and 10 students in STEM. Of those 10 STEM students, we had 4 engineers in the group. And so far, 22 of them have graduated. 22 out of 30. A few have gone on to master's programs. But this information, nobody is keeping track of this very well to get the information out there to people. So children do not need 16 years of formal education. What they need is more play, and that is decreasing every year. Okay. Now, I have a lot of slides here. I'm not going through all these slides because I just leave them in here because I want to pick and choose to show different groups of people what it is. So let's just skip to brain development and learning. And Babies are born with 100 billion brain cells at birth. For the most part, they're not connected. They're connect as they experience different things through life experiences. So if you look here, the brain, the first 3 to 6 years are the most impactful on a developing brain, and it impacts that architecture of the neurons connecting with each other. And then by age 7 to about 15, the brain starts pruning those pathways that are not used as much as the pathways that are used. And governments trust parents to do a good job educating children from birth to age 6 when those are the years that count. So why can they not trust parents to do a good job educating from age 7 to 18? Okay, so that's the main point. What I want to show you here is the development of the frontal cortex and the prefrontal cortex. That's where most of the executive function development occurs. That is where working memory, focus, self-control, and planning takes place. And you can see from about age 3 to age 6 that the brain takes a huge leap in executive function. And that's why children don't start formal mandatory school until age 6, because they don't have that self-control to sit down, pay attention, don't poke your little friend with your pencil. And then by age 6, it plateaus a bit, and then it takes another big final leap here from age 13 to 25. At age 13, children start getting their abstract thinking skills. So they start to think more theoretical instead of concrete. And that's a good time when a lot of kids tend not to do play in the traditional sense. They tend to leave the childhood play behind, and they want to do more adult study. They do research on the internet of topics that interest them, and they carry on learning through more theoretical ways. And that fits very nicely with maybe some of them want to do a more formal high school program, although they don't have to, but some are ready to. And you can see that about age 17 right here. From 17 to 20, a lot of school is still funded. And if children want to pick up a formal chemistry course to get credentials for engineering, or they want to do calculus math, they can pick up a course and understand it very well. What I want to emphasize is that children are not learning through play through all these ages. They're definitely learning through play and projects. They're just not learning through textbooks and workbooks and formal teaching methods. But when they need to write exams, they can demonstrate a lot of what they know. And of course, curriculum varies according to country and state and province. So they might have to brush up a bit of what the curriculum is in their geographical area, but then they can challenge exams and go on to post-secondary or to work or to entrepreneurship. Okay, now we know babies, toddlers, and preschoolers love to learn through their 5 senses. And they put a lot of things in their mouth. They taste things. But we also know if you keep on, school agers like to do the same. And in fact, adults do too. When I do keynote presentations, those adults, I want to get them up every 10 minutes because they don't want to sit there and listen. They want to learn through doing, through experiencing. And that is the best way to learn. So a common question we get is, what about math? So everyone's worried about math because math is a really good subject that builds sequentially. But children can still learn math through play, through games, through just living everyday life, because math is all about solving problems. And too often in school, what we do is we teach children the tools before they have the problems to apply the tools to. Whereas in real life, they encounter problems, and then that's a good time to teach the tool because they can immediately apply it. I have a picture here. Oh, I guess I didn't put it in this one. Where we ordered a cheesecake from a restaurant, and it was pricey. So we actually got a half a cheesecake. And when I opened the box, I discovered it didn't really look like half a cheesecake. It looked like a good inch was cut off down the diameter. So I said, kids, let's check this. So then that was a good lesson on pi and circumference and what's the radius and diameter and how to figure that out. And we got an extra coupon because it wasn't really half a cheesecake. But a lot of these concepts are math. Children can learn through playing board games or shopping, baking, those kinds of things. Helping with a home renovation right here. They do. Same with these. My kids learned about Roman numerals from reading Asterix and Obelix books. Okay. They learned about slides, turns, and flips through manipulating photo imaging software. So they can learn a lot of these things. Then remember that magic age at 13 when that prefrontal cortex is starting to begin its second upward climb. They can learn a lot more theoretical things because they're ready for it and they want to by then. And these are things they could learn there. So they're more motivated to pursue maybe more paper-based work around the teen years. But maybe not. Maybe that's going to come a little later, maybe around 17, when they really know what they want to plan for and go into. Okay, that's kind of all I wanted to cover there. How do you unschool? Okay. Again, it's freedom to learn. So when the child needs it, that's when they want to learn it. Okay, how does that apply to music lessons? When the student's ready, the teacher appears. So my experience with the team of 30 kids in my book is that a lot of them tried music lessons when they were younger and got bored, didn't practice, and then dropped it. And then when they wanted to learn in their late teens, in their early 20s, they were more motivated to learn and they caught on just as fast. Now, I know everybody says there are sensitive periods of brain development for learning certain skills, which is true for languages, but it doesn't mean the brain can never, ever learn skills to a confident level. It just means it takes a little more motivation and a little more practice, but it's still doable. So my kids learned the violin, the guitar, and the piano about age 18. 16 to 18, they picked it up, and they had the focus and the executive function to actually study and practice them. Same with learning languages. They learned languages French, Japanese, Latin, and German at about age 17, 18, and into early 20s. And they learned it enough to go live in those countries and work in those countries for months to years. So definitely doable. So the thing to remember about unschooling is, let me just get back to, it's self-directed education, but the child determines the pace, content, everything. The adult role is facilitator attentiveness to what the child needs. There's some things they want to do and they can't access. So it's getting them resources. And again, if there's any motivation problems, it's not self-directed education. Now, unschooling is not homeschooling. Homeschooling is very much controlled by the parent or the caregiver. Unschooling is not permissive. A parent or adult acts as an attentive mentor or facilitator that provides resources when the learner indicates interest. Permissiveness is inattentive neglect. It's not well researched yet because we treasure what we measure, and the best way to measure are exams. And a lot of unschoolers detest taking exams, just as many teachers know that it doesn't measure things other than math skills or knowledge of where capitals are. It doesn't measure creativity or initiative or perseverance, all those intelligences and capabilities that education endeavors to educate the whole learner, but is not measurable on an exam. And unschooling is not uneducated. Children who unschool learn as much or more as children in structured learning environments, but they go deep into subject areas, and it sticks because they're intrinsically motivated. So how to unschool? Just give kids a lot of unstructured time and have a stimulating environment of resources. Doesn't mean you need all these things, but offer them as your child wants them. Okay, what do kids do all day? They read, they research, they play, they game with board games or, video games. Oh my gosh, all 5 of my kids were video gamers. And it's great. One of them is actually working in the field now, so it pays off. They do chores, they do field trips and travel, they cook, they do crafts, they do projects, they volunteer, they run a small business. They do anything out in the community and real life. And their subjects are interwoven. They don't have a subject area here and here. It's all interwoven. What about post-secondaries and universities? Oh, okay, I'm just gonna, how did that? Okay, sorry. Let's just move back here. I did want to touch on this. So the school model versus unschooling model. So in school, teachers study learning outcomes. They plan lessons, they deliver, they evaluate, assess, and then they report. Unschooling is opposite. It's working backwards to that. So the child plays, and then the facilitator observes closely, and the facilitator decides, which learning outcomes were touched on, and records that, and then reports that. So the outcomes do not drive the learning at all. The child is unaware they're being assessed or observed. And that's important because once you start to guide and direct play, you change the nature of it. Okay, what was I going to show here? Okay, I don't have much time for all this. Okay, how to get into post-secondaries. For most universities, they don't really need a diploma, certainly in Canada, maybe in North America, but most post-secondaries want to see 5 grade 12 subjects. So math, English, science, social studies, history, geography, maybe a language or an option, or advanced math, calculus, depending on what the child is going to go into. Those courses need to be presented. So sometimes parents can issue a transcript that they have made. It's not accepted worldwide, but they have to be careful to put everything on a transcript. Sometimes you can present a government-issued transcript for self-taught courses, and that's more universally accepted. I know in Canada, we can definitely do that in certain areas of Canada, that the government will ask you to prove self-directed learning and then record it as a real course on a transcript. So incoming admissions in universities don't even know which children are homeschooled and which are going to a physical campus school. Sometimes you can just challenge diploma or SAT exams, present those results for incoming to colleges. That works. Sometimes course challenges are allowed. Sometimes some children just complete only the grade 12 course and exams. They don't go for a high school diploma. In fact, my son was second-year engineering when he actually graduated high school. Sometimes they do all the high school core courses, maybe grade 10, 11, and 12 core courses, because math and chemistry and physics do tend to build on each other from high school. Some do the GED, which is a equivalency diploma. A lot of people do adult high school upgrading at the university. The most common way is a lot of unschoolers go to community colleges, do a few courses, get really good marks, and then transfer into a degree program of the university they want. So, and sometimes it's a combination of community college transcripts and parent-directed transcripts. Can be both. Sometimes children challenge university entrance exams, or they go into open studies programs, try it out for a year, do very well, get good marks, and transfer over. Or they can do in-house upgrading. A lot of universities offer courses that are high school levels, but they get the whole university experience, which is kind of nice. A lot can apply as mature students, certain ages. There are certain seats allotted for mature students. Or a lot just go into a regular high school about, age 14 and decide, okay, I'm done unschooling. I don't want to play anymore. I want to actually do some formal work. And in the team of 30 in the book, a few kids did that. They went to high school, thought it was too much work, took too much time, and then decided, nah, I'm going back to self-directed. And the beauty is they go to a high school knowing that they do have options and other alternatives. Okay, and we're at almost this. So I think that's pretty well. What if they play video games all day? We're going to get a question like that. Video games are very educational. They teach cooperation, commitment, teamwork, critical thinking under time constraints, problem solving. They foster creativity and innovation. In the book, I list a whole chapter on the benefits, the academic, the social benefits of gaming and screen time. I mean, screen time is a concern when children are little and learning language, and if they're not talked to, read to, sung to, that could be an issue. But for the most part, for school-age children, as long as they live in a household where people talk to each other, there's no adverse childhood experiences, screen time is not an addiction. It's not generally going to be a problem, and it is very beneficial. Okay, and I think that's pretty well all I'm going to show you today, other than just want to say, can play replace school? Absolutely it can. Absolutely. Children learn as much play as through other ways to get their education. And I just want to read this little poem that I love. I tried to teach my child with words. They often passed him by unheard. I tried to teach my child with books. He only gave me puzzled looks. Despairingly, I turned aside. How can I teach this child? I cried. Into my hand, he placed the key. Come, he said, and play with me. And that's by Anonymous. So I'd like to open it up for questions. I cover all this in the book, Unschooling to University. I also have a blog, unschoolingtouniversity.com. Feel free to touch on things. So I'm going to read the comments out here. Okay, we have a comment from Dorothea in San Jose, California. In the community colleges in California, they can attend classes even at the high school level if being homeschooled. There are so many online courses available where students are given certificates of completion for courses. Okay, that's good to know. She says screen time should be limited even in older children. I'm going to comment on that. For older children, we do not have enough good evidence research to say that screen time is a problem. Yes, you're going to hear the odd study that makes the headlines, but there's still not a good metadata of information. What we do know is that we make recommendations in absence of evidence that children should get enough physical activity. There should be enough conversations. They should have routines, because we all love routines. So that kind of moderation, okay? But again, those are decisions that every family makes. There are families that are extreme limiters, and there's a lot of families, kind of like us, who are non-limiters, okay? So that is much a personal choice with each family. Okay, what about children who live in an environment where there are few places to play, such as inner city neighborhoods? There are, maybe I went overboard on the resources point, but there are children who will make play out of sticks and boxes, and those are the best toys, because the least amount of toys children have, the more they use their creativity and their imagination. And those are all very good brain building activities for learning. Absolutely. So the beauty is you don't need a whole lot of money to unschool. It doesn't make everybody a lot of money. It doesn't make a lot of people any money, which is probably why you don't hear about it so often. But it is very cost effective. And, you know, I would suggest parents just start with a library card. Well, we can go back to physical libraries, internet access if possible, and just embrace their curiosity. And for example, my son wanted to learn how to plant an egg and would it grow an egg tree. So we took time to go out there and plant an egg because he wanted to know. And I wasn't going to put him off and say, oh, you'll cover biology in grade 12. So we had this whole month of, he was obsessed with eggs. So we learned all about eggs and it stuck. So yeah, it was good. Okay, someone says, I find that screen time for me is affecting my vision. And yes, that can be a problem for some people. Definitely screen time, you know, you do want to take breaks and it does affect some people more than others. But my philosophy is, you know your child best. If they spend 3 hours on Fortnite and they're starting to get grumpy, you know maybe it's time to change their activity to go for a walk, right? And I tell parents all the time, I say, if you invite children to do something with you, you'll have a lot more success pulling them off the screens and doing it. Saying, hey, let's play Settlers of Catan, or help me build a Lego fort. Yeah, they're going to join you. They're going to love it. You know, they may want to finish their game first because they commit to teams, but they're going to want to do it. Jim says, I'm finding that this week's too much screen time, but I chalked it up to age. And his question is, how can unschooling ever hope to gain popularity if it isn't being monetized? Exactly. Absolutely, exactly. There are a lot of unschooling schools popping up now, which can charge private school prices. And I have always been of the philosophy, why would I send my child to a school so that they can unschool and pay a lot of money for it? Now, a lot of parents need employment support from a school. I get that, right? A lot of parents now, in that they want to direct their child's education, they're hiring tutors, they're hiring tutoring nannies, tutoring unschooling nannies to educate their children. And that's great because they are taking their child's education direction under their control. And I'm happy to see more and more parents having more thought and care into what their children's education experience is going to be. That's good. Okay, Karen Leary says, I'd like my second grade teacher daughter to see this. My granddaughter is 4. I like these ideas. Well, great. I think this session is definitely shareable. I have a few sessions out in the internet, Unschooling to University blog. They're up there on there too. And of course, the book is 384 pages of charts and descriptions and what the 30 kids who unschooled anywhere from 3 to 12 years did to get to university. Alan says, you may have mentioned, but we looked at the quality of child engagement in play and learning. It's not enough that children are engaged. And while the adult parent role may be as an unteacher, should they still know how to ensure that engagement is indeed resulting in learning? That's a good question, but I find it hard to separate engagement from learning, because if you look at kids in their play, they are totally 100% absorbed in their play, and they are learning. And I don't distinguish, and a lot of unschoolers do not distinguish between educational resources and non-educational resources. Everything in the world is education and will stimulate learning more. For example, my kids were so much into Mario, Nintendo, Yoshi, all those video games. And they played way too much time on those video games. But they also spurred them to make different things from those video games. I even could probably show you that. That was very interesting. They made puppets, they made costumes, they made, I don't have it here, darn. Okay, anyways, they made costumes, puppets, they wrote books, they put plays on. They used games as a springboard for other creative endeavors. And they learned how to write, they learned how to read, they learned how to do math, they learned aspects of science. So it was very educational. Most of their elementary school science was learned through Magic School Bus. So, and 3 of my kids went on to STEM programs in university and STEM careers. So it was good. I don't think there's a difference between engagement and learning. Dorothea says, unschooling was something that was done early on in our country and with African Americans during and after slavery. Oh, okay, that's interesting to know. I didn't know that. Okay, anybody else questions? We have about 15 minutes left. Okay, Maria says, what about reading and writing? Good, I'm glad you asked that. Reading and writing. I wonder if I have a slide on that. I do, sort of. Okay, so reading. Let's look at reading. Reading is a developmental skill. All children are developmentally programmed to crack the code at some age between ages 4 to age 10. That's a big, wide range. Why do they push learning to read in schools? In Canada, most kids have to learn to read by the end of grade 1 or they start getting remedial programs. And yet there are many, many homeschoolers that don't read until 8, 9, 10. My kids, my experience, I had 3 late readers, and those are the ages they started to read, 8, 9, and 10. And I didn't make a big deal about it. I was getting pressure from our school authority to push those phonics. And I just thought, nope, not doing that. They will learn to read when they read. And by the time they learned to read, you couldn't tell the difference. They were reading this thick novels within a year. You couldn't tell at what age they learned to read, any of the 5 kids. So but they didn't get any hang-ups or bad feelings about themselves as late readers. And that's what you don't want. You want kids to embrace their natural schedule. You want books around. You want to enjoy and cuddle and read together. You want reading to be a pleasurable activity, but you can't force kids to read. It comes when it comes. It's kind of like toilet training. Every child toilet trains at a different age. And when they're 20 years old, you don't know when they toilet trained or when they began to read. And we live in such a literate society right now that there aren't many kids that do not read. Do not. Writing comes from reading. So if reading is a pleasurable activity, writing follows. So in our school division, high school kids get to read 1 novel a year. Homeschool kids read anywhere from 10 to 50 novels a year. Look at that rich background because they have the time to read and they get to pick what they want to read. So they have a lot of reading and understanding to draw from. Writing follows reading. Children write when they have something passionate to say, and too often in schools, they don't have passionate things to say. They have somebody else's agenda. So if you want kids to read and write, let them feel passionate about issues. Let's say your child wants to play a video game till midnight one night. Ask them, say, put it down in writing and argue your case and find some sources on the internet to back your argument. They are going to learn how to write an essay. So also, kids are learning how to write 5-paragraph essays all the way, every grade, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10, 11, 12. Even first year university, they have workshops on how to write a 5-paragraph essay. So it will come. Kids will write and they'll read because they need it in society and they know they need it. Science and social studies best taught through experiential learning. We travel a lot as a family. We travel very cheap. We do not go on tours. We do public transport and we do Airbnb. So we go to places. And I have to say it is so much more incredible for kids to go visit a concentration camp than to read about it in a book, or to do science experiments rather than read about it in a book. And that's why schools push reading so early, is because from grades 1 to 3, kids are reading, learning to read, so that from grades 4 on, they're reading to learn. But at home, you don't have to deliver content through books and through textbooks and workbooks. You can deliver content through experiential learning. So if your children don't read until age 10, doesn't matter. They will get it. Okay, so I went off on a tangent a bit there. Back to chat. Okay, do we have more questions? Okay, Doretha says, the research shows that if a child is not reading by 3rd grade, they are more likely to fall behind as well as getting involved in gangs. I'm a retired special educator. Yes, I have seen that research too. But keep in mind, most research done on child development and education right now is done on a child that is in an institution. Okay, very clear. Most research is not done on children who are raised or educated outside an institution. So when you educate a child outside an institution, they don't fall behind because they're not being measured as a cohort. There's nobody to fall behind. In fact, their confidence increases because, and their motivation, because they are not being compared to others constantly. They are encouraged to develop and progress as they are progressing. They're only measured against their past performance. So I disagree. That research does not apply to kids that are raised outside an institution. Kids develop and they read and they gain confidence when they do. And nobody makes a huge deal about it. Okay, Jim says there are sectors of the population where there is not a print-rich environment, nor an environment where they see benefits that draw them into reading. You know what? I would say our whole society is going that way. We are going less and less to reading and more to visuals, icons. You look at the internet now, everything's icon-based, not text-based. Books are getting smaller. When I went to university, we were expected to turn in 15-page essays. When my kids went to university, their essays were 3 pages. So everybody, attention span is lessening as a society, and the importance on reading is lessening. You look at YouTube, we all want to watch videos, and Netflix more so. Sure, books will never go away, but we definitely are spending more and more of our leisure time and learning time watching TED Talks through video and audio too. Question from Rachel. I recommend the book Voyage of the Basset to read to kids. The author was an artist and did detailed, beautiful paintings that as a child I loved to look at. So many children's books today have drawings done by adults that may have well been done by children. Good point. Okay, Alan says, unschooling may ultimately be a first world luxury until some of the basics, safe environment, nutritious meals, and educated parents are equitably established. Unschooling leaves behind those already left behind. I'm not too sure about that, because in some countries such as India, what they're doing now is, one of the problems is teachers are not showing up to teach the classes. The kids are there, the teachers, maybe they're not poorly paid, maybe they're poorly paid, but they're not showing up. So a lot are appointing a class mom or dad, and iPads or tablets are being donated to the children, and they gather in the schoolroom, they get an iPad. As electricity is becoming more and more in countries that were previously rural, they are getting iPads to educate, and that is actually working. The iPads go home with the class parent at the end of the day, so they don't get damaged, they don't get lost. And I think unschooling can actually grow in places other than first world countries, because all you need is the internet and a connection, and that is growing too. And as more and more people have smartphones and can look at content, can access content, access courses on their phones, they're going to be educated. They do not need a formalized school program to be educated. Like I said, boundaries are going to be eliminated. Access to courses and education is going to be eliminated. Education is due for disruption. There should not be boundaries on who can go to university. It is everybody's right to do that. Okay. From Jim, question, I'll do this real quick. Can you address learning disabilities? Not cognitive impairment, but conditions like dyslexia. How do parents recognize and get help for children who have this impairment to reading, which I imagine will not be overcome by mere curiosity and motivation? Speaking as a parent of a child who had a learning disability, parents are usually the first persons to detect them, because you go on play dates, kids socialize. Whoever says homeschoolers don't socialize, don't homeschool. But we are not homeschoolers, we are community schoolers. And you kind of look and you can feel and notice if your child's not the same as their same age peers. So parents can recognize those. A lot of them do get extra support, even though they're home educating or unschooling, they can still get supports in speech, language, occupational therapy. And a lot of times what those kids need is not more book work. What they need is things that parents can provide, and especially in a one-on-one situation where, you know, all they need is somebody one-on-one to work with them. So they can either access that professional help or they can access how to do it themselves. Okay, question from Michelle. Thinking 6 months out in today's current virus crisis and the lack of funding affecting access to the internet and smartphones for some, do you think that there will be a return to the principle of the one-room schoolhouse with these ideas of unschooling? Not too sure. It could happen. I mean, with the internet, you could have a one-room schoolhouse where everybody's at different levels. Definitely, that's what happens in homeschool families. When you have 10 kids with an age range over 20 years, you are a one-room schoolhouse. So but with unschooling, my dream is that you have these little learning pods of 5 people. You look at the Magic School Bus. Mrs. Frizzle, she only had 7 kids to take on a field trip. She would, one child one day would say, "Hey, my sandwich is rotten." And Mrs. Frizzle would say, "Oh, that's a great idea. Let's go on a field trip about mold and sandwiches rotting." And that to me is unschooling, is you take someone's interest and you run with it when the fire is hot, right? So I think more and more smartphones and the internet are going to get in the hands of people who don't have it right now. I think borders are coming down. I think educational gates are going to come down because basically people can learn anything anywhere. What I think will stay is proving credentials, right? I mean, I still want my unschooled pilot to have a certain level of competency flying a plane. I don't care where they learn to fly a plane, but they have to pass that test, right? So I think we will grow more in that, but acknowledge that people can learn anything from anywhere, from anybody, and in any method. I think that will grow. Okay. That is pretty well. We're running out of time. So I want to thank everybody for coming to my session today. If you want to continue the conversation, please visit my blog, unschoolingtouniversity.com. I share a lot more of our experiences and the 30 kids that I wrote about in the book. And I'm just happy that you shared this hour with me and get you thinking about, you know, this is an idea that is all over the world. Every country has unschooling associations and Facebook pages, and it is growing, even though it's not often acknowledged in the established educational forum. So thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye, everybody. Hope to meet up again soon. There we go. Alan, I could answer that. Your question was, should adults involved in the unschooling process dismiss the comments of children who disagree with their philosophy of education? Maybe. As kids get older, they have definite opinions about things. And people's philosophies change, right? My husband was not fully on board with even homeschooling when we started, and yet now that we have 3 university graduates, he's the biggest proponent of it. So people change. My philosophy is never say never. Absolutely. Oh, You're talking more about you. Okay, so, well, you know what? By the time a child reaches 17, and if they want to go to school and pick up more courses, they absolutely can, right? We all do things in children's upbringing that they may not agree with when they're older, but we do the best that we can with what we know at the moment. And if we think unschooling is a good fit for our kids, then who's to say that's bad? So great parents are out there. You guys are all great parents. You have your child's best interests in mind, and you can do what's best for your kids. Absolutely. Okay, I better get going. Thank you so much. You got to figure out how to turn off the meeting. Okay, bye everybody.